The desert has many faces, but it's at night that it shows its cruelest. When the sun fades, all that's left is the wind carrying dust like ash and a silence too heavy to be called peace. There were no crickets, no coyotes, not even the dry trees dared creaked. It was as if the world had held its breath, waiting for something. Then I heard it, at first faint, then clearer, the creaking of wooden wheels, calm, insistent, as if advancing unhurriedly, but without stopping. I've known that sound since I was a child. Carts, trains, but no man with common sense would dare cross the desert at night. The cold cuts, the darkness swallows, and stories teach that those who walk after midnight find no destination. They find damnation, and yet that sound lingered, echoing across the sand like a memory that refused to die. With each crack I felt my heart keep pace, heavy, slow, as if the desert were trying to force me to keep going. Then I saw the first light, an old lantern, then another and another, swaying on the horizon. 3, maybe 4, but no hands to hold them. No horse in front, no driver on the bench. Just the procession, illuminating the darkness on its own. My instincts told me to turn away, but my eyes remained fixed on nothing. The gravedigger of Red Hollow was right. The wheels that turn without hands are a sign that hell has opened the way. I should have backed away, but I remained still, because that night I wasn't facing a rumor. I was facing Caravan of the Dead, and if you have the courage to follow me, you will understand why this road should never be followed to the end. Rumors had been swirling around Red Hollow before that night. Women swore they saw lights moving beyond the hills. A miner said he heard wheels squeaking in the dry riverbed, and a child spoke of wagons covered in black cloth, each dragging chains that slapped against the sand like whips. No one wanted to repeat these stories aloud, as if simply speaking them would open the doors for the procession to pass through again. I didn't believe it myself until I saw it. As I passed through the city gates, the sound grew clearer, wood twisting, creaking, in rhythm. It didn't come from near, nor from far away. It came from everywhere at once. My eyes searched the horizon, and there they were, ancient lanterns, dim lights swaying, lined up like dead soldiers on the march. As I walked on, the vision became clearer. Old wagons, covered in torn rags, moved in a line, each moving forward, without a horse or a driver. No voice, no whip, only the dull creak of wheels. The sand marked deep ruts, but the tracks disappeared soon after, as if the desert swallowed the very memory of the caravan. It was then that I heard something else, whispers, low, muffled, coming from within the wood. They weren't echoes of the wind. They were voices, many mingled, pleading or calling. My chest tightened, and for the first time I realized I wasn't looking at a freight train or travelers. This was a procession, an eternal funeral, repeated nightly, and I, Elias Blackthorn, had just been a witness. But seeing is only the beginning, because what I discovered when I tried to follow them was far worse than the stories whispered in Red Hollow. They say a sheriff's courage should fit in his holster along with his bullets, but that night there was no lead to sustain me. The sound of the caravan didn't push me away. On the contrary, it pulled me in, as if each squeak of wheels were a call, an ancient order no one dares disobey. I followed the tracks in the sand. Strangely, I realized they only existed in front of me, never behind. It was as if the train had no origin, only a destination. The bloody moon illuminated the path, and each step made me feel the weight of centuries, as if, as I walked, I inherited a guilt that wasn't mine. The silence around was absolute. Not even the farm horses stirred, nor the dogs barked. The entire desert seemed to bend before the processions. When I finally approached, I saw 6 wagons, each covered in worn cloth, their ancient lanterns swinging by themselves, casting distorted shadows across the sand. I approached slowly, my hand resting on the handle of my revolver. I knew it would be useless, but it was the only human gesture I had left. The wind carried a cold breath toward me. Voices, many voices. They came from within the wood, beneath the chains, as if each cart carried not coffins, but faceless mouths. Screaming in unison, my heart beat slowly, heavily, and deep down I understood this was no ordinary caravan. It was an eternal procession, a ritual the desert refused to let die. I should have retreated, but instead I continued, because if the caravan of the dead was calling, I needed to know who it was waiting for. And that's when I realized that the next name that echoed in the silence could be mine. The lanterns didn't flicker like live fire. They burned steadily, unmoving, as if each flame were held by invisible hands. The creaking of the wheels echoed in my chest, louder with each step, until there was no doubt I was standing before the caravan of the dead. 6 wagons lined up, covered in torn, dust-soaked cloth. Chains hung from the sides, clanking against the wood in a rhythm reminiscent of prisoners' shackles. No horses, no driver's voice. Yet they moved steadily, as if obeying a road known only to them. I approached the first one. The canvas shifted slightly, as if something was stirring beneath it. I swore I saw pale fingers pressing against the fabric, trying to escape. I took a step back, but didn't fire. The chill coming from inside the wagon wasn't wind. It was presence. Further ahead, a second wagon opened for a moment, and I heard muffled groans, like those of people buried alive. Wood creaked, and the sound of nails scratching echoed across the silent desert. My eyes burned, and my hand tightened on the revolver's grip. But what good is a gun against the condemned? The desert, previously silent, seemed to vibrate alongside. The procession, even the stars, seemed more distant, as if unwilling to witness what was happening there. And deep in my heart I knew this wasn't the first time that Caravan had passed. It was simply the first time I dared to face it. The night grew denser, and the procession slowed its pace, as if it were waiting for me. And in that instant I realized the caravan of the dead didn't just pass by. It chose who would follow. There are times when silence itself seems to conspire against man. There, in front of those wagons, the entire desert seemed to push me forward, as if wanting me to see what no one should witness. I approached once more, my eyes fixed on the torn cloth of the first wagon. The fabric swayed as if breathing. For a moment I thought it was just the wind. But the wind doesn't sigh. The cloth rose and fell like a human chest, swelling and wilting in agony. I reached out hesitantly and felt the cold wood beneath. It wasn't dead wood. It was wood pulsing, as if alive. I jerked my fingers away and listened. From inside, a muffled, dry sound, like nails scraping against the inside of the crate. The desert echoed with the sound of a scream, not loud but deep, stifled, as if coming from beneath the earth. My stomach churned, and my heart beat slow, heavy, as if each pulse told me to retreat. But I didn't. I walked alongside the second wagon. The canvas was torn at the corner, and there, for an instant, I saw it. A pale, bony hand with broken nails reached out. It didn't tremble. It didn't plead. It just stretched, as if reaching for something it already knew was there, me. When my eyes found that hand, the canvas fell away, and there was nothing left. But the cold remained. I moved on to the third, and the horror grew. The coffins, poorly secured inside the carts, banged, put against the sides, as if whoever was inside was still trying to escape. The sound wasn't of loose wood. It was of trapped bodies, banging, pounding, demanding freedom. One coffin tilted, nearly falling, and through a crack I saw emptiness. But the emptiness wasn't silence. The emptiness screamed. It was as if the dead had lost their bodies, but not their voices. The fourth wagon revealed the cruelest secret. It wasn't just wood and iron it was dragging. It was memories. I saw shadows within it, indistinct shapes that writhed, as if the soul itself were weighted and chained. Voices echoed, and for an instant I recognized one of them. It was the tone of an old comrade, killed years ago in a shootout. His voice whispered my name, clear, crisp, as if he had never left. I felt my legs tremble. It wasn't just a procession of the dead. It was a procession of those who knew the living. The last two wagons passed slowly. Then I noticed the most terrifying detail. Neither of them left tracks behind. The sand was marked by the wheels, yes, but it quickly closed in, erasing each rut, as if the desert swallowed the memory of what it saw. And the tracks that remained, curiously, pointed only forward, never back. The caravan had no origin. It had only a destination, and it was at that moment that I understood the weight, pay, of that encounter. The Caravan of the Dead wasn't just a legend. It was a ritual, an eternal repetition. It didn't carry goods, nor bodies. It carried souls. It carried the damned on an endless march, always in search of more. I, Elias Blackthorn, stood still, trying not to breathe loudly, fearing that any sound would be an invitation to join them. But the silence around me left me no choice. The procession seemed too slow, and the ancient lanterns turned toward me. like faceless eyes scrutinizing me. And in that terrible moment, I understood. The caravan wasn't crossing the desert by chance. It was looking for someone, and perhaps that night, the chosen one had been me. I stood still, watching the caravan move away. The wheels creaked in a slow rhythm, the dry sound echoing like the clash of bones against bones. The lanterns flickered in the distance, but never went out. They seemed doomed stars, lit not to guide travelers, but to remind the living that there was an eternal procession walking alongside them when they finally disappeared over the horizon. Silence returned, but it wasn't the usual desert silence. It was a thick, suffocating silence that seeped into the bones and hung heavy in the air like ancient dust. Even the wind seemed hesitant, blowing just enough to lift grains of sand, but lacking the courage to dispel the emptiness left by the procession. I looked around. Reed Hollow was nearby, quiet as ever, its wooden houses shuttered and their lamps unlit. No resident dared peek. I knew everyone was awake, but each locked in their own fear, praying quietly that the caravan would pass without taking anyone else. Tonight, the burden was mine alone. And perhaps that was the fate of a cursed sheriff, to guard the secrets no one else can bear. I began walking back. My steps were heavy, and each creak of my boots seemed to echo louder than it should, as if the ground itself held the memory of the wheels that had just passed. I felt the cold clinging to my body, a chill that came not from the night, but from the invisible chains that still surrounded me. I wasn't free. I had merely been spared. For now, back at the office, I thought I'd find peace. I was wrong. The wood floor was covered in wagon wheel marks, imprinted impossibly, as if the desert had crossed the door with me. Grains of fine sand accumulated in rows, drawing furrows that advanced towards the door and disappeared there, as if the carts had passed through my space. I sat at the table, but the silence wouldn't leave me. I closed my eyes and listened. The creaking of wheels, more distant but constant, and, alongside it, the muffled voices calling names I never wanted to hear. It was at that moment that I understood. The caravan of the dead doesn't belong only to the desert. It passes through cities, streets, and houses. Wherever it goes, it leaves invisible traces. When you choose someone as a witness, you never leave. It walks with you, stalks your steps, bides its time. Since then, I haven't had a night's sleep, because deep down, I know I wasn't just a spectator. I was marked. No matter where I am, whether in the empty saloon, the abandoned church, or even sitting in this office, whenever I close my eyes, I see flashlights swinging in the darkness, always at the same distance, always following me. And that's why I leave my warning here. You might laugh. You might think these are just the words of a tired old sheriff. But listen carefully. If you're ever alone and hear the sound of wheels, without a horse, chains clanging without a handle, lanterns lit without a driver, don't follow, don't look back, don't try to understand. Because the caravan doesn't carry passengers, carries convicts, and when it stops in front of you, it will be too late to decide whether or not to follow it. I am Elias Blackthorn, last sheriff of Red Hollow, and I tell you, the desert holds more secrets than any man can bear. And with each story I tell, the road opens a little wider. But don't think the road ends here. The desert holds more secrets than any man's memory can bear. And in the next story, I will show you one that should never have been told. If you have the courage to stay with me in this darkness, click in the story that appears on the screen and move on. Just don't say later that I didn't warn you.